All right. Well, hello everyone. I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Andrea Gehrz, and I've been an astrologer for 25 years. And really, I've had a long journey in astrology. I went to Kepler College. I have done thousands of readings. In fact, last year I purged 4 feet of charts, and that was just some of my charts. So I've done a lot of readings in my life. In my old age, I focus on astrological remediation and getting the word out about that, just letting people know how to fix anything they can see in a chart. But it's one of the things that really leads my astrology is teleology, and it's really, really important. So I'm really excited tonight to talk about teleology, and let's have a philosophy class, okay? So I'm going to start sharing my screen and play these slides here. Okay, just want to make sure I can see everyone. Okay, so today's topic is an introduction to teleology for the modern astrologer. Okay, so if you've heard the word teleology, raise your hand. All right, well, that's not very many people. How often is it that you actually heard a word you've never heard before? That's pretty rare. Um, so let's actually get into it. I like to introduce, there's not a huge group today, so I think we could do some introductions. So I want to know, like, what kind of astrologer are you, and what is your philosophy behind using astrology? Are you an evolutionary astrologer? Are you a Hellenistic astrologer? What are you? So, if people wouldn't mind introducing themselves, let's see, I can't see on the screen. Can people there actually talk? Can I? Yeah. Okay. So why don't you guys introduce yourself? Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassiopeia. I've studied Hellenistic astrology for a couple years, so I'm really excited for this class. I think my philosophy behind it is that astrology is just here to bring us closer to God's plan and feel like we're in divine order exactly where we are and give us a map to navigate the things that are coming our way.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, I love that. Okay, it's cool that you're a Hellenistic astrologer. You'll really enjoy this. Okay,
Yes.
how about the woman on the couch there?
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I've practiced psychological astrology. I've studied with John Green under Liz Green and her whole school in London. I think it's just a really great tool to look at the unconscious, to look at our inner life, and that's how I use it.
Wonderful. What you'll find is teleology is kind of psychological astrology in some ways. It would be like the ancient version of that kind of. It's like nothing you've ever heard of before, but this is really great. Okay, and that guy sitting next to you?
I'm Chevy. I'm interested in all forms of astrology, mostly psychological astrology at the moment. But yeah, just interested to learn and as much as I can in all different modalities, I suppose.
Awesome. Okay. And the person behind you?
Yes, I'm Lewis. I'm into Western astrology mainly, and my premise for studying astrology is really for us to be able to gain deeper insight into ourselves, have more self love and compassion for others.
Nice. Beautiful. And Rusty?
Hi, I'm from Asia, from Manila, Philippines, and I studied Hellenistic astrology and some forms of medieval astrology. So basically, yeah, I believe that there is meaning in life and faith, no? Meaning and faith, and astrology is the best way of understanding it.
Beautiful. Shane?
I'm Shane. I've been studying astrology for just about a year now. I've been studying mostly with Andrea, so I guess I would be a teleological astrologer. Uh, so I'm looking forward to this presentation because I've heard quite a bit about teleology. And that's sort of my philosophy too, is it's a good map for better understanding ourselves and the world around us.
Beautiful. Richard Dillon? George Dillon? All right. Let's get to it. That actually really helps us to know who's here and what we're dealing with. Okay. So, how I found teleology. Well, I was translating the Vedic Valens anthology, which a lot of you have heard of. If you study Hellenistic astrology, you've heard of Vedic Valens. The most popular translation that exists is open source online. It's by Mark Riley, but there was a guy named Robert Schmidt who was translating Valens first, and I went out to Cumberland, Maryland to the conclave, and I'd worked as a sign language interpreter for about 15 years at this time, and I could see that they were struggling with certain translation things, and I thought, you know, I can do this. I've been a trained translator for 15 years. I can do this. So I went and learned Greek and Latin, and I started translating Vedic Valens. Well, I wasn't reading other people's translations. I was reading the Greek, and I couldn't understand all of the Greek. Like I could understand some of it, but I mean a lot of it. But there would be these concepts that were sticking me up, and I couldn't. They kept saying like a manifested thing, and when a thing's manifesting, and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, long story short, I read other books in Greek. I went and read some of Porphyry. I read a book called Ensoulment, which is about how the soul gets in the body by Porphyry of Tyre. This, if we have time at the end, we'll read excerpts from Ensoulment. But this is an essay on how the soul gets in the body, and it's seriously, teleology is all over this thing. Well, I was, you know, in my translation journey, I went to a history of science convention, and there was these professors talking about teleology, and I was like, what? This is what they're talking about, because they kept using the word telos. And so history of scientists or science historians know what teleology is. In fact, Galen, the ancient physician who gets quoted a lot in astrology, he was a teleologist, and it informed his physician studies and things like that. So after that history of science convention, I came back and I went back to the translations, and I could understand everything. And so the missing piece was teleology. Now, if you read some of the translations of Valens, they're really hard to understand. There's parts of it that are really obscure. You're like, what are they talking about? And it's because they're missing teleology. So I think then, you know, after I learned teleology, I was able to finish all the Valens translations, and that's been behind me. I think I finished those about 5 years ago. But in the Tetrabiblos, the teleology comes up as well. I'm just pulling out book 1 of the Tetrabiblos. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Tetrabiblos, but I'm going to read you the first little paragraph here. So, Tetrabiblos was an ancient book on astrology. It wasn't Vedic Valens, it was Claudius Ptolemy. But he says, astronomical prognostication is an exceptional study. In the art of preparing a firm prognosis by means of astronomical laws, there are 2 steps. The first step in predicting a telos is to observe the arrangement of sun, moon, and wandering stars. So see, the word comes up right in the beginning of the Tetrabiblos. It's like we are predicting a telos. And all of these ancient guys knew teleology. They all knew what a telos was. And so it's like, this is really integral to understanding Hellenistic astrology. If you understand teleology, you will understand these Hellenistic texts much, much more. So that's how I got to studying teleology, was history of science convention. Okay, let's start on teleology definitions. So the first definition is the study of evidence of design in nature. Okay, so you know how we hear about the fatedness of astrology? Well, it's like, what kind of fate is it? Is it like the fate of having a mom you couldn't choose on the other, like you couldn't choose your mom? Is that a fate? You know, all this stuff. There's different kinds of fates. But teleology would be looking at the fate of design in nature. Like, you know, a tree has a round trunk and it has rings. That is just the fate of the tree design. if you can make a table out of a piece of wood, but you can't make a table out of a rubber band. These are fates of natural design. Like, do we get mad at this? Like, oh, you said I can't make a table out of a rubber band. You're so fated. You're so fate-based. It's like, well, we're looking at the fates of design of nature, right? Like, it's just like, in some ways, we would say like a super water chart is fated to be able to make music, right? But we don't get mad at those fates. We just say this is natural design. Some people are designed to make music, and some people are designed to file papers in a cubicle. And that is kind of the fates that we're here to look at with astrology. In fact, one of the words for fate is Moira, and my publishing company is called Moira Press because Moira is one of the coolest kinds of fates. It is the word for a degree in the chart. So like your sun degree is your Moira. It's your sun Moira. But it's the fates that we're here to partake in. So let's say your sun is at 5 Cancer. Well, they would say you're here to partake in the fates of 5 Cancer. So every time the moon hits 5 Cancer, you're here to partake in the fates of being you. It's time for you to cook something. The moon's at 5 Cancer. It's time for you to take care of your tiny kitten. The moon's at 5 Cancer. See what I'm saying? If you're a Sagittarius sun and the moon hits your sun in Sagittarius, it's time for you to go on a little trip or something. That's part of the fates you're here to partake in. So really, we want to look at how we're looking at the evidence of design in nature in the charts here, right? These are where the sun, moon, and everything was at birth, set up a certain natural design to your soul and psyche, and that's what teleology is studying. Okay. The second thing is it's a doctrine explaining phenomena by final causes. Well, what's a final cause? Well, we'll get more into final causes, but a final cause is basically what something is for, okay? So we would say a tree is made to be used for wood, and thus we can make a table with a tree. A tree is here to build houses with. Now some people would disagree. They say you're cutting down all the trees to build houses, and that's a bad use of trees, and all this kind of stuff. But like, I would encourage you to ask yourself, what is a tree for? Because that's its final cause. And teleology looks at things growing into themselves for a certain reason, right? So it might look at a chart and say, your son's at 5 Cancer. You're here to be a mother. You're here to take care of tiny kittens. That's what you're for. That's the final cause of the sun at 5 degrees Cancer, perhaps. If your sun is at 5 degrees Sagittarius, you might be here for fun and joy bringing. Sagittarian blondes have more fun. A lot of Sagittarians are blonde people and they have a lot of fun. Okay. Maybe they're here designed by nature to be really fun. And they come to a party and they just make a bunch of jokes. And so they're here to have fun. I mean, you might be disagreeing with some of what I'm saying, but you get what I'm getting at here is that each chart, each person has a final cause, according to teleology. Each of us came here for something. Now, in the book Ensoulment, this whole essay is about how the soul gets in the body, like I said. But throughout the essay, you'll see them say, well, souls incarnate for a life purpose, a task for which they are made. That is teleology to say, you incarnated for something, right? So it's like when we look at these ancient texts of Vedas Valens and all these Hellenistic texts, they scared everyone. Valens is super scary. He's a Scorpio Aquarius. He is supposed to be scary. That's what he's for. No, I don't know. He's a horror author. He's hilariously scary. Anyway, but he was actually really honest. He would be like, this chart is made to be the town executioner. Okay, well, he was speaking to what this person was for, right? It's like, and that's what I love about Valens. He'll be like, this chart will make a good nanny and a prostitute. And you're like, okay, well, at least you're speaking some teleology, although you are kind of wild, bro. But like, the point is that these ancient guys knew that we all incarnated for something. And that's why they describe charts from a really young age. And they'll say like, this is the chart of a king. They're like, this baby is to be king. And that was, they were looking at what each baby that was born was for, because then they were going to cultivate that life to be the best king that ever lived, right? They weren't just looking in the fates of charts for no reason, right? They want to help that fated thing grow to the best of its ability, basically. Any comments or questions? Okay.
What is the
Teleology,
significance
go ahead.
of the degree? Yeah.
How significant is it?
What is the significance of the degree? Like, what would the degree say about like 5 degrees instead of 15 degrees?
Good question. So think about this. If your sun's at 5 Cancer and your best friend's moon is at 5 Cancer, the two of you are supposed to express your fates at the same time. If your sun's at 5 Cancer and your best friend has their moon at 20 Cancer, you pop off, and then the next day your friend expresses their fate, right? So you guys don't really line up to express your fates together. So the degrees come into play when you're doing synastries, or let's say you're timing a project for your business. You want to work with people who have fates at the same degree, because everything comes down to timing. In the natural design of things, as the moon goes around that clock monthly, we are expressing ourselves right on a certain time clock. And so the degrees are important, because literally when your time is up, it's time for you to pop. Like artists call this cloud, producers call this cloud bursting. They'll sit around waiting for artists to express themselves in the studio. They'll book all the studio time, and they sit and they watch the artist, and when the artist starts popping, they like start put on the recording thing. And I'm like, you can time that to the chart. I mean, come on. It's like they cloud burst right at the 5th degree. Come on. So it's like, I think in the timing of a chart, the degree is very meaningful. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah. No, of course, there's other layers to it, like the Sabian symbols. Like some people would give a certain symbolic meaning to your degree, and some people call the 29th degree the anaretic degree. And so I think there's in books of medical astrology, there's lists of degrees. Like they would say that 5 Cancer rules the top of the stomach, whereas 30 Cancer rules the bottom of the stomach. So also in physiognomy, which is how people are built physically, the degree definitely shows where the energy of your chart lives. It's literally like in Pisces, 0 would be the beginning of the foot, and 30 degree would be the tip of the toe. So like in physical astrology, the degree also really dictates like where exactly we're looking, or where we're doing bloodletting, or where we're doing purgation of fluids. I mean, like there was a lot they would do, but like the degrees are important for a lot of layers, I guess. Yeah, it's a good question. Cassiopeia.
It sounds like very controversial talk for this day and age, that you're meant to be one thing. I personally kind of like it. It feels very old school. You're born into a family, and your family makes shoes, so you make shoes. So life was just like a little bit more simple, and you kind of knew your place and your role, but it was also way more restrictive. And say you want to be a shoemaker, it was pretty hard box. And so this conversation kind of brings that up for me, like for the people who are like, well, I'm not here to make shoes, and like what that journey looks like, and if teleology addresses that.
That's a really good question, man. I love that you guys are advanced astrologers. This is fun. Okay, so astrology is one of the most identity political studies you can ever do. To tell somebody anything about themselves in the modern day is really political. Like you can't tell someone what their gender is, which I agree with, right? It's like people should be able to self-identify about their own gender and their own chart and everything like that, right? But with the way we dance with a person on their chart is to make a delineation. We would say, I would delineate the sun at 5 Cancer as X, Y, and Z. Now you get to speak back to me. Do you agree with that delineation or not, right? Okay, and if we disagree, then let's watch a transit to it and see what happens when the Jupiter goes in Cancer and the Jupiter goes over your sun. Then we'll really see what's happening with your sun, right? You might not be into making shoes right now, but when Jupiter hits your sun next year, you might really take up the shoe study, right? So it's like a lot of it is where if you're being a very fate-based astrologer, you let the planets pull people out right on time. A lot of times we'll predict something in a chart, but it's not time for that. For example, the sign of Scorpio has been inert for like months and years. Like everything's in Taurus, right? Jupiter was in Taurus, Uranus is in Taurus. So I have all these Scorpio clients. They're like, I'm not very Scorpio. And I'm like, all right, well, what do you do around Halloween? And they're like, well, that's when I build the haunted house every year. And I'm like, that's when the sun's on your sun in Scorpio. You're a Scorpio. Like, I proved it. I just proved it. Like, but I mean, so some of it is that you want to make sure you're getting the timing correct, because a part can lie dormant in a chart for a long time, right? I also take them back to the Me Too years. I'm like, you remember the Me Too movement? And they're like, yeah, I was fighting in the courthouse and against rapists. And I was like, all right, that was your Scorpio, because Jupiter was in Scorpio during that year. Like, whatever the point is like, we have to also. So I agree with you that this is a super identity political dance, and we can dance with our clients. But it's better to be an astrologer who says something about your fate than to just be like, whatever you want to do. Because they hired you to say something about their life purpose, you know? The other thing I would say is people are always like, well, if someone wants to be an Olympic athlete, they can. And I'm like, not if it's not in their chart, they can't. And they always get mad at me. And I'm like, from a manifestation perspective, what you do depends on what you want. Some charts will want to be an Olympic athlete over and over and over again on transits to their Sun Mars conjunction in Aries, right? Like maybe that Sun Mars conjunction wants to be an Olympic athlete. It doesn't want to make shoes, right? And so it keeps visioning itself, jumping over hurdles and like visioning itself, you know. Another person might say like, well, I want to be an Olympic athlete too, but then they keep baking all day long. And what you see is a Moon, Jupiter, Venus conjunction in Taurus rising. And you're like, no, you want to be a baker. They're like, no, I want to be a hurdle jumper. I'm like, well, why didn't you vision that every day? You kept baking cookies, right? So I think it's in some ways a better thing to say every chart can be excellent at something, right? If you, and you'll see that throughout our lecture, is like, if you choose to work for what you were built for, you will be excellent and flourish. If you choose to work against your fate, then you're going to have to work a lot harder and you'll be kind of mediocre. Yeah. I know it's kind of a little controversial, isn't it?
But I like it.
All right. Good. All right. The last thing that teleology can be defined as is the natural process of being directed towards an end or purpose. So, you know, we would say that the Olympic athlete is here for that life purpose. And they're being directed towards that life purpose over and over again. They might have a transit away from their Sun Mars conjunction in Aries, and that, you know, they're hanging out with their friends or something, and all of a sudden the moon comes back to Aries and they're like, I got to get out in the hurdles again. I got to get out in the hurdles. And we're like, oh, you're developing into an Olympic athlete for real, actually, you know, because you keep doing that thing. And so I want you guys to know that your charts are, in theory, being directed towards an end or purpose. Okay, maybe part of your purpose is to be an astrologer, and that's why you keep going to the astrology meetings, right? But now all astrologers are different. Some of them do elections, some of them don't read charts, they just study it in school. And here we might see somebody who's like Pisces on the 9th house, and you're like, well, I just like to study astrology. And we're like, oh, that is your end purpose. You're here to study spiritual things in the 9th house. Whereas if somebody has their moon in the 10th in Pisces, trine Uranus, they're a career astrologer, you know, in the public eye doing this and that. And so like the life path and purpose can be very precise depending on what we see. But there's a million life paths and purposes. But do you guys know that existential boredom can kill people? Like if the existential boredom is like when you're like, I don't know what to do with my life. Have you guys ever felt that way? I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know what to do today. I don't know what's meaningful. Well, astrology in a teleological way cures existential boredom. If you know what you're here for and you live one transit at a time, you're always growing into your life path and purpose. You're always growing in a meaningful fashion. And that's a beautiful thing. So, all right. How about this? If you have a comment or something, stop me, but I'm always open to comments. I don't like wait till the end or anything like that. I'm a more Socratic discussion-based teacher. So, all right. Now, astrologers are teleologists, and part of this is because we watch the planetary clock, which shows evidence of design in nature. So we are actually natural scientists in some ways. I prefer to call astrology a technical philosophy, but it can be used scientifically in nature. But it's very technical. Like we are looking at nature, but when I was talking about the degrees, like we can be as technical or as amorphous as we want. A lot of people say like, oh, I'm not really a good astrologer. And I'm like, well, you're doing great. The philosophy of astrology. A lot of the astrologers are really good at the philosophical aspects, but when it gets down to the technical aspects, they feel like they're not good enough. And that's actually, it doesn't mean they're a bad astrologer. They're just doing the philosophy. But some of us are keen planetary watchers. Like Nick Digg and Best, one of my friends, they call him the human ephemeris. It's like he's constantly doing the ephemeris, and it's like I'm constantly doing the ephemeris too. I don't know who watches the ephemeris throughout the day. Anyone? Okay, all right. All right. Well, you are doing great at your teleological duty, which is watching design in nature. I'm sure you guys enjoyed the Mars-Uranus conjunction, right? That was fun, in quotes. That was fun. But the thing is like we're saying, oh my God, there's explosions. The president got shot in the air. Like all these things are happening, and we're like, oh wait, that was designed by nature. Mars and Uranus were conjunct, which is an explosive energy. And if something crazy didn't happen, then I wouldn't think that the astrology clock is working, right? So we look at things like warriors in history. Like, people, a lot of peace activists are like peace and love and light and live, laugh, and love. And I'm like, well, people have been fighting for thousands of years in the public marketplace, and warriors have existed for thousands of years. They look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, wait, haven't you been to an ultimate fighting match? Like fighting exists in nature. I mean, that is Mars for you, right? Like with the Mars-Uranus conjunction, that was a natural moment where nature was designed to fight. Tons of my clients got in weird fights and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, if you're a teleologist about it, you say like, there was a purpose to that fight. That happened for a purpose. Okay. So let me ask you this weird question. What is the purpose of a fight?
No conflict.
What is it?
To confront and resolve conflict.
Good. Like there's tensions building up, and then we confront it and we deal with that, the difference in opinion, right? Okay. Is there anything else a fight's for? Okay, I'll say this. People are more productive and creative when fighting. I'm in a band. Oh, go ahead.
Jung says that conflict is energy.
Very good. Without conflict in a storyline, people get very bored, right? So it's like we could say conflict is here to provide interest. I'm in a band with a Sun-Mars conjunction and Leo person. Do you think we get along? Like that chart is just constantly yelling at me, but he gets a lot done. And he's a producer. A lot of producers in the creative industries are super bossy. They're like, now we're playing a show. Now we're doing an album. Now you're going to write this song. Now you're going to add a chord here. And I'm just like, oh, really? All right, I'm going to, because you're my producer. I hired you for that. You're a Sun-Mars person. And you want to be productive and creative. Okay. I don't want a milquetoast producer. They don't get anything done. Okay. So the thing is that Mars gets stuff done. It cracks through tensions. It keeps life interesting. No, go ahead. You're probably saying, well, we could say that a fight is for anything we decide it's for. Well, this is philosophy class. You can actually think about how to live. Like philosophy thinks how to live, right? So one of the things we can do for our clients is when they had a fight with their partner or their friend, we can say, oh, that was, fights are good for X, Y, and Z, right? And that would be looking at the design of nature and saying, why is nature designed to have conflict? Same with, depression, right? Like that would be a Saturn issue, right? Like, so I think in our current, psychological milieu, it's just like, oh, you're depressed. But what was the depression for? Like what was it for? Well, I was thinking. I was going off by myself and I was thinking. Or, but you see how if we change the conversation with our clients and we say like, well, what's this Saturn transit for? Saturn's going over your moon. What's it for? Right? What are you going to use this time period for? That really changes the conversation around transits to say like every transit can be used for something and can grow you into the next phase of your development. Okay. Now, what is a final cause? If you guys want to learn more about this, you can Wikipedia the final causes, or you can look at the four causes. I can't remember if it was Plato or Aristotle who talked about the four causes. I don't know if you want to look that up, Shane. I think it's Aristotle, but there were four
It's
causes.
Aristotle.
It's Aristotle.
Yeah.
Do you-
Robert Hand talk about this thing.
Oh, nice. Do you know what the four causes are?
Sorry. It's like I forgot the terms, but Robert Hand talk about this. I said that there is the primary cause, and then that defines, I think, what would be the outcome, which is the final cause. And there are two in between. I forgot which one.
Good. There's a material cause, which is what's the
Yeah,
material a thing
material.
is made out of. So, that's like the table being made out of wood, and we'd say it functions to hold things because it's made out of wood, which is its material cause. Shane, did you find the other ones?
So material, formal, efficient, and final.
Okay. Is it easy to see what the other ones are?
Sort of. There's a pretty decent illustration on Wikipedia. Like a material cause would be wood, the formal cause would be the design, the efficient cause is carpentry, and the final cause is a dining room table.
Okay, interesting. So, you know, I don't mind having everyone participate in the lecture. I think that's actually a better teaching style, so it's kind of fun that way. But I don't focus on the other causes because this lecture's on the final cause. But I do think it's a fun thing to study. Okay, so the final cause is the purpose, end, aim, or goal of something. So this could be a thing, animal, or a human's function. For humans, this could be a life purpose. So what's the final cause of this pen? What's the purpose of this pen?
Writing or communication.
Okay. Well, I thought I was going to poke my eye out with it.
I suppose you could do that if you wanted.
Okay. Okay. What's the final cause of this nail clippers?
To trim my nails.
Okay. All right.
Apparently, it's to poke your eye out.
Do you know that I can use this nail clippers to clip a piece of thread? All right. But it's made to clip nails. And in fact, it functions really well when it clips nails. Okay. So that would be like saying like your chart is made to make music. And you're like, well, I can also run. And you're like, okay, why don't you go run? But you're made to make music. All right. That's what you're made for. Okay. What's this phone for? What? Well, there's like 1,000 things we can do with our phone, actually, right? So it's like the final cause of a phone was probably initially to call someone on the phone, right? But this actually has like 1,000,000 final causes. Some people are like, well, I play Words with Friends on my phone, and I text message, and then I keep my notes app on my phone. And like, some things I suppose can be used for anything. But I think the final cause of a phone was to be able to call someone and text someone. Okay. But you see how it's not a super clear thing, right? Like, well, what's this chart for? Well, sometimes it's obvious what it's for. Sometimes you're like, well, this chart could be like used for like 10 different things. I mean, I'm not really sure what its cause is, right? But have you ever seen a chart where you're like, oh my God, this is the chart of a fighter or something like that? Have you ever seen a chart where you're like, I have some ideas for what you could do with your life? Okay. All right. So now let's talk about telos. Telos, what is a telos? Okay. So telos is the root word of teleology, right? So teleology would be the study of telos, right? And if we heard in the Tetrabilos, he said, the origin of every telos is the sun, moon, and all the planets. Okay. So a telos is something that has developed into itself and it has reached its final cause. Okay. So they would say, they always give this example of an apple. And once the apple tree has grown to the point where the apple can grow on the vine and you can pluck it from the vine and take a bite from it, it is now an apple telos. Okay, something that has formed into itself to the point at which it can be utilized for what it is here for is a telos. Okay, and this is why I was reading the Greek books and they kept talking about telos, and I'm like, I cannot understand Vedius Phalanx. He keeps talking about a telos. Like, I don't even know what a telos is. Because it's not that easy of a concept, right? It's just like, they're always like, well, what telos is forming here? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, so it's literally anything that is formed into itself. So the couch you guys are sitting on, is that a telos?
Yes.
Okay. Is it a couch? It's probably a couch telos, right? Like, if I was gonna say, I'd be like, no, it's a shoe telos. I'm a shoemaker, and that's a shoe telos. Like, no, that's a couch telos. It's obvious. You're sitting on it. That's what couches are for. Okay. See what I'm saying? It's like this is my coffee telos because it's like it's been brewed into a cup of coffee and I'm drinking it. Okay. So it's a coffee telos. Now, if the coffee beans were sitting on my counter, not ground up, not made into coffee yet, it's not a coffee telos yet. It's a coffee bean telos. Okay? So I want you to kind of really get comfortable with the idea that a telos is something that's been formed into itself. Okay, now when we were making this book and it was like in the stage where it was like in the first draft stage, was it a book telos at that point?
No.
Okay, interesting. It was kind of like, it was what?
Craft telos.
Half telos. Oh my gosh, that's a new. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna be like, you're half telosing. You're supposed to be a musician and you're not playing music. You're only half telos. But for real, like if something's being formed, and they would actually talk about this, they would say, when you're building a ship and then it starts to go to sea and then it starts to be built while it's at sea and then it builds itself and then it's all of a sudden flying and it's a telos, right? So it's like we could say children are kind of a telos, but they're not really a telos yet because, let's say we see little Timmy and he's got a Sun Mars conjunction in Aries and he starts punching his neighbor at school. He's just like, oh, I don't like you, bam. And they're like, problem child, telos. You're like, oh no, that's not a problem child. We never let a telos stay at problem child, okay? We're gonna turn this into the best ultimate fighter we've ever seen because he's here to be a fighter. That's why he hit your little Sally, okay? But he's not a telos at the point where he's punching somebody erroneously in class because that's not him living out what he is for, okay? Here, the aspects of personality are just kind of coming out untamed, and that's not really a telos, okay? Now, he is formed into a human telos, right? We could say that a human formed is a human tail. See, it depends on where you're looking on what is this thing for. You know what I mean? Like if you're like the like a baby that's formed is a baby talos, right? Because it's there to be a baby, and it's, which we don't know what babies are for, but I think they form big humans. But they're also there to be cute and fun and, you know, bundles of joy or whatever. So you're like, it's a bundle of joy, Talos, and it's functioning quite nicely. It's making me happy. Okay. But you get it. It's like it's all a matter of perception of like, what is this thing for, and has it formed into that yet? Okay. Any questions about Talos or comments?
Great explanation.
Did you say that was a good explanation? Thank you. Isn't philosophy fun? Okay. All right, now this is a little excerpt from an article. Robert Hand published my article on astro.com. It's called An Introduction to Teleology for the Modern Astrologer. So if you want to read more, you can go to astro.com and read that. But here's a little excerpt. It says, let us dive further into teleology through its root word, telos. A telos could be defined as a creature, plant, or object that has fulfilled its unique, complete, and perfect form. A telos is the actual end product of the life. For instance, a perfectly ripe apple could be understood as been having pulled towards its final cause or purpose, which is to become an apple. When it has reached the acme of its existence, it will have manifested into an apple end product or apple telos. Teleology then could be described as a study and explanation of things unfolding into their end product. Okay, so have you ever thought of the chart as a map of unfolding? We're unfolding ourselves. You guys are unfolding yourselves tonight by being at an astrology lecture. You're unfolding a little bit more of the astrologer in you, right? But let's examine this part where he says that the apple has been pulled towards its final cause. It's been pulled. Huh. Well, what do you think is pulling the apple towards its growth?
Hey, it's design.
Okay. Good ideas. Good ideas. I agree. Fates are pulling out that apple. It was the sun. That's where astrologers are true teleologists. They said that the sun's whirling every day pulls things to growth. Have you ever watched a plant in the sun grow right towards the sun like that? Like, you know, if the sun's, if the light's over here, the plant will grow like this towards the light. That's the sun pulling at things to growth. One time I was on a plane and there was this baby sleeping in front of me, and its hand was like sitting near the window, and all the sunlight was coming in on the hand. And I'm a Pisces moon, and I can kind of feel auras, and I could feel the aura stretching, and then the hands were about to grow towards the sun that was acting on the aura of the baby. And in fact, astrologers know that we grow on a helix of light, actually. And the sun and the moon act on our helix of light, and they'll pull our helix out, and then we pull ourselves more into growth towards the whirling sun. Have you ever noticed in a tree that those rings in the tree, right? That's the sun whirling, and it makes rings as it's growing, like things grow in rings. Or you guys know the Fibonacci spiral, like the golden ratio? Well, the planets are actually in the Fibonacci spiral, or the Fibonacci ratio. So as they're whirling, they pull things out in the Fibonacci ratio, right? So teleology is like not actually joking when we say that astrologers are really teleologists, because we're looking at the whirling of the planets and how they're pulling people out to growth. In ensoulment, they say that the human plants its own seed of life on the other side from the ether for its life purpose, at which point it's pulled out to existence in the womb, and then pulled out from the womb, and pulled out, and then pulled out to grow from the sun and the moon. Now, here's another example of this. What is a volunteer in the garden?
Someone who starts growing.
Say that again?
A plant that starts growing without intention of the gardener.
Okay, isn't this weird? A volunteer is literally seeds that lie in the soil, and all of a sudden they sprout up and they start growing, right? And there was no intention, no one planted the seed, but the sun pulled it out to growth. And what the teleologists would say is that when the sun gets into the right color frequency for that seed will sprout. So for example, a lot of how we get astrological color theory is through this like teleological lens. Like Sagittarians are said to be blonde. My daughter's triple Sagittarius and she's really blonde, and she's not get it from me, she gets it from her chart. Well, if you look at the leaves in Sagittarius, they're yellow. And the sun-earth relationship between the relationship between sun and earth creates a yellow frequency. And so yellow things are pulled to growth under Sagittarius, including yellow humans, blonde humans. Now, don't worry, you can apply this to any race. It's like there's like genetics, like seed, culture, climate, and then the chart. So it's like you take the genetic seed of the plant or the person, and then you put the chart on top of it. So you can, I had a friend from Chile, and she could only have brown eyes because her mom, like she could only, that's all that was available to her, but she was 6 planets in Sagittarius. And when you looked in her eyeball, you saw a yellow ring around her brown eye. And that was her yellow chart on her brown eye. But the point is that it's the sun and moon that are pulling everything to growth, and that's how teleology was said to function. Okay. I think we kind of did this exercise, but it's like, I want you guys to think for homework. A fork, what is the fork's telos? You know? Some people would say it's like for stabbing food and eating food, right? But you can use a fork for other things, right? You can, you know, loosen the soil around a plant with a fork. You can stab yourself in the arm, like after this lecture. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying you can do other things with a thing, but there's a purpose for each thing, and that's its telos. Okay? Okay, here's another quote. We can now move to the concept of telos as practicing astrologer Vettius Valens used it 2,000 years ago. In the 6th book of his anthology, Valens writes, "The moon races throughout the stars, walking on the planets and flowing away from them. As she does, she carries the winds, creating eclipses, shadows, and other phenomena. These moments sync up earth, sea, and heavens. The racings of the moon, in combination with the remaining stars, are the origin of every telos created." Okay. You see how Valens was a teleologist? All of the ancients were teleologists. They all knew teleology. Now, did all ancients know astrology? No. In fact, what they would do is learn everything. They would learn math and science and astronomy and psychology, and then they would take on astrology. When they had learned a lot of things, they understood how intricate and complex astrology was. But as you see here, the astrologers knew teleology, and what they believed is that whirling of the moon once a month pulls out, as they would say, that every time the moon goes over another planet, like let's say the moon goes over Mars, it pulls down Mars energy. And if you look up in the clouds, you might see red clouds when the moon's conjunct Mars. And they would say, like, you know, have you heard of them, like the gods are mad right now, there will be a war or whatever? Well, they're saying the moon is pulling down a martial telos right now. That's how they would think of it, right? If there was a baby born with the moon Mars conjunction, they would say the baby of this, or the aura of this baby, is very red, and thus it will make a martial telos. Okay, so I really want you to align yourself to the movings of the planets and realize that they're pulling everything to growth, and that's how the chart was thought to get into us, and that's where all fates are said to come from, at least from astrologers. All right. So I just have a note here. Telos and teleology are all over Valens. They're all over the Tetrabiblos. They're all over the Bible. In fact, I was talking to Demetra George at the Northwest Astrological Conference, and I was saying, Demetra, don't you think teleology is missing from Hellenistic astrology? And she said, yes, I do. And in fact, in my new book, on the last line, I talk about Jesus. And Jesus said in the Bible, he said, "I have now completed my telos and I can die." Jesus said that. So what he was saying was, I have completed my life purpose and now I can go. Okay, so I'm working hard with the Hellenistic astrologers to try to make sure that all Hellenistic astrologers know what teleology is. So I think, you know, you guys can help by getting the word out and saying that this is all over the translations. And if you're in Hellenistic circles, I want you to bring this up and say like, okay, well, what about the teleology of that? What about the philosophy here? You know, all that kind of stuff. All right.
Awesome.
Any comments or questions? All right. All right, what is apotelosmatics? Okay, so as you can see, this word has the root telos in the middle of it. Now, the Tetrabiblos, which is one of the best ancient Hellenistic books ever. I know Valens gets all the cred because he's like a horror artist, but the Tetrabiblos is more of like the philosopher professor guy, Ptolemy, you know, writing about just astrology in general. Ptolemy also wrote the Almagest, which is this astronomical treatise. So he wrote about astronomy, and then he also took on astrology. Well, the Tetrabiblos is also called Apotelosmatica. Okay, so let's deconstruct this word. Matics, okay, that ending. Okay, you know, we could say problematics. I'm studying problematics. Okay, I just made that word up, but you kind of get what that is, right? You're like, all things connected to problems. Okay, I'm studying astrolomatics. Okay, that would be like all things connected to astrology, right? So this is all things connected to a telos, and then the prefix apo is like full on. So what astrology actually was all things connected to a telos growing full on. Okay, so the astrologer's job was to say, what is growing here? What is the life purpose? What is the final cause? All right, now we're going to pull that and we're going to make sure it grows a lot and really well. Okay, so let's get back to little Timmy, the Sun-Mars conjunction in Aries. Okay, in the modern psychological day, we do things like, oh, he has a Sun-Mars conjunction in Aries and he's hitting everyone in class. But from a psychological perspective, everything is okay because little Timmy can work it out. I don't really know what the psychological astrologers would say about this. But what the teleological astrologer would say is, we've got a warrior spirit here. We've got a warrior spirit misplaced. It's growing in a classroom. That's not where warrior spirits grow. Warrior spirits grow in martial arts studios and in Brazilian jiu-jitsu gyms. That's where martial artists grow. I'm serious. I know, isn't it funny? It's funny. But you see what I'm saying? They would say, get that kid out of there. That is the wrong context. You are not training them for what they're here to do. Okay. Let's take another example. Let's say little Charlie has a Moon, Venus, Jupiter conjunction in Taurus, and he sits in class and all he wants to do is eat cookies. He's like, get me out of class, I just want to eat a cookie. And they're all like, oh no, get him to the doctor. He's gonna be overweight and there's something wrong with little Charlie or whatever. And what the teleologist would say is, we've got a baker growing here. Oh my God, there's a baker. He's a little baker. He wants to try some bread and cookies. Oh my gosh, get him out of that classroom. Bakers don't grow in classrooms. Get him in the kitchen. Okay. Okay, so getting plants into the right context is a big part of teleology. Now, why do I keep saying plants? Teleologists would endlessly compare people to plants to understand what to do. They would say, have you guys ever grown lettuce in the hot wilting sun? What happens to the lettuce?
Wilts.
It dies. Okay, have you ever grown a hot chili pepper in the shade? It doesn't get very spicy. You know what I'm saying? So one of the biggest things they would do is pluck people out of context and put them into different contexts where they can grow heartily. Okay, so remember when you hear the term apotelosmatics, you realize, oh my gosh, my job as an astrologer is to look at what is fated here and get this person growing perfectly. Okay, we're like little farmers. And in Soulmate, they talk endlessly about like, it's this human's like an untamed plant. The child is wild because it's untamed. The farmer has not taken care of it. Okay, so if somebody's acting inappropriately, it's because we have not gotten them in the right context where they can act appropriately, right? Nowadays, you can see those YouTube videos of those little martial arts kids who are like 5 years old, like, and they're just like, wow, 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 wow. And they're just, guys should watch like little martial arts videos. Like, they're crazy. Like, this kid is doing their job from the time they're 4 years old. And often this would be if, like, Cassiopeia brought up the shoemaker, born to a shoemaker. If we get a little martial artist born to a sensei father, all of a sudden we've got a superstar because that kid was growing in the right context from the time it was born. Right. And so then we're just like, why is he so good? And we're like, oh, because he's being allowed to do his life purpose from the time he was born. He already knew what he was doing. You squashed him. See what I mean? Okay. Now, if we look at Wikipedia on the Tetrabiblos, you can see that it just says Tetrabiblos, also called Apotalismatica. I just wanted to show that to you guys because, Valens gets all the cred, but we're reading the Tetrabiblos at the Moira Press School, and it's phenomenal. In fact, there's a book written by Porphyry of Tyre. It's called The Introduction to the Tetrabiblos. So it's like he wrote, the Tetrabiblos was supposed to be kind of hard to understand. So this guy wrote an introduction to the Tetrabiblos. I encourage you guys to read the Tetrabiblos if you're Hellenistic astrologers, because that was Apotalismatica. Okay. To move this over. Okay. All right. It is interesting to notice that nearly all ancient astrologers were working from a teleological worldview. Our predecessors hardly understood that the end product of a life is dictated by the weathers of the birth moment. Ancient astrologers were working under the assumption that the natal chart reflects potentials for temperament, expression, life purpose, vocation, all contributing to the end product or final cause. Our predecessors affectionately called the chart an apotelosmatograph, which is a graph of all matters pertaining to the full manifestation of the telos that shall come to pass. So what if you told your friends that you were an apotelosmatician instead of an astrologer? Go over. See how it sounds a little bit different? And then all of a sudden the chart becomes a graph. It's actually, we have an apotelosmatograph here. Why does that sound so much better than this woo-woo chart? Like, look at my chart, look at it, it's so woo-woo. It's just like floating in space and my Neptune's in the 7th house and like whatever I say is whatever goes. It's not woo-woo. Actually, it's a graph of all things pertaining to this life that's going to grow here. And it's actually very, very important. Okay. All right. I have to keep doing this because you guys are covering my slides. Okay. Now, from a teleological perspective, what is the natal chart and what does it indicate exactly? So imagine going to the store to buy a pack of seeds, and the pack is decorated with an image of what can be grown with the seeds inside. This is what the natal chart indicates. It's the potential fruits of the vine, the life purpose, and the heart of creation. So it's almost like, if we compare you to a plant, you'd say, oh, like a Sun, Mars, and Aries plant. This is going to grow a fighter. The Moon, Jupiter, Venus, but this is going to grow a baker. But basically what we're saying is if we plant this seed of life, what will grow here? Okay. Now, a lot of how we look at people astrologically is from a physiognomy perspective, which is how people look according to their charts. Just looking for my favorite book. Done it. Has anyone ever read the Astrological Body Types? Anyone have this book? Oh my God. So I really encourage you to get this book. According to Judith, who's one of my best friends, we all look different according to our chart. And this is actually so true. And what we look like dictates what we are made to do. Okay, let's look at the different body types here. So here's the fire type. Okay, see how they're kind of muscly? They might be runners or athletes or, firefighters. Here's a tall, lanky air sign. Okay, have you guys ever been to a history of science convention where I learned about teleology? There's a bunch of tall, lanky professor types, right? With kinky hair. And they're full of oxygen. They're super air charts and their blood is full of oxygen and they can handle a lot of numbers and they're really cerebral and they have that kind of autism of the like really dry variety. And like the point is they look a certain way. Okay. Now, this is a water chart. See how it's kind of round? Okay, I won't show you guys my water belly, but I have one. Okay, but a lot of psychics are really watery. Like if you get like a super Pisces psychic, those big round psychics that are like, come over here and I'll see your future, whatever. The point is like people, it drives me nuts because all the Virgo doctors are like, everyone needs to be thin and everyone needs to be this or that. And from a teleological perspective, you're like, aloe plants are puffy for a reason, okay? Without the puffiness of an aloe plant, you can't break it open and rub it all over your wound, okay? So a round water person is actually like that for a reason. They're really snuggly. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, sometimes we want to snuggle. Sometimes we want a professor to talk to us about facts and figures, but there's different builds for different purposes. Okay. Here is the Earth. Here's the Earth variety. Okay. I remember I had a client who was triple Earth. It was an Earth Grand Trine, and she was like super huge and she was built like a tree. And I was like, well, what do you do for a living? She was like, I'm a jail guard. And I was like, oh, okay. You're like a wall. You're a tree in a wall. Okay. All right. So you can't be taken down. You're built for this. Okay. But you see how like a super lanky, tiny thing can't really be a prison guard? Because their body is not built for it. Okay. Now, can anyone be a stonemason? I mean, no. You guys are all trying to do the thing where like, we can be anything we want. No. Stop it. If you're going to be an archaeologist, you'd say some people are built to be stonemasons and some are not. Okay. A lot of stonemasons are super Taurus charts with a bunch of muscles right here and they just like stand in one spot and they lift stuff or what have you. Now, a super cerebral chart like 10 planets in Gemini, they would get bored being a stonemason. They'd be like lifting up stones like, oh my God, and then that math problem, and then these stones are so boring. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we want people to be in jobs that they are built for. When people are like, I hate math, and someone's like, but you can do math. I'm like, all right, you hate math. You're not built for math. Well, not really totally. I mean, come on, we don't want to like discount kids who are like 12 and hate their math professor. But you get what I'm saying? There are charts that love math. So why wouldn't we have our math professors be the charts that love math? A lot of what we're here to do is what we're built for and what we can do naturally, right? All right. So as teleologists drawing up a chart, we can ask, what are the preordained potentials in this chart? What will grow here? What is the final cause, purpose, and end product? We can examine physical potentials through physiognomy. What will this body look like? Will it be earthy and dense or muscular and sinewy? Will it develop into a chubby Italian cook or a lithe Olympic athlete? Will the face be chiseled and square or round and cherub-like? Will the body be tall or short? Okay, this makes me think of something. Okay, imagine we had a Italian cook who had a Moon-Saturn conjunction. Now imagine an Italian cook with a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. You're laughing, right? Because that one's like, come on, eat my food, eat and be merry. I'm going to feed you. I love you. I feed you, right? And the Moon-Saturn person's like, I don't like this food, and like this food doesn't taste good, and I'm not going to eat today, and I only like to eat 13 calories. And like, it's just like, I mean, I've had like, it's just like, we don't want somebody who's averse to food cooking our food because it's just not what they're here to do, right? You guys are laughing because you're good astrologers. Like when you see a chart and you think about it this way, you're like, I can feel that person cooking, right? And that other person, I can't really feel him cooking. Okay.
We were just talking about that.
What were you guys talking about?
We have a Moon Saturn guy here. We were
Oh my
talking
God.
about, I was like, Venus and Taurus. I was feeding him, of course.
Oh my God, that is so personal. I hit it right there. No, I don't know. Would you ever be a cook?
I'm not a great cook.
All right. Okay. Well, that was a good case in point. Okay. So what we're asking with the chart is what is the temperament, first of all? It's like, we've heard about melancholic temperaments, um, sanguine temperaments. That's like a big temperament thing. But I think it was Carl Jung who used the four temperaments of the four elements to classify people. So we just want to look at temperament, basically. Like somebody who's really feisty and can't sit down, we're like, you don't have the temperament to sit in an office or a cubicle, or like if someone's really melancholic and kind of depressive, we're like, well, you don't really have the temperament of a kindergarten teacher. It's like, so we can just think of it as temperament. Like the chart is your temperature. What is your temperature? What's it like to do? What traits will mark the personality? Now this, you guys are advanced astrologers, so it's like you get more exacting here. It's like if they have a Venus Neptune conjunction, you're like, oh, I can see you might like art or music, or if we have the Venus and Taurus, you're like, oh, this part of you might really like cooking, or so like what traits in the chart mark the personality? So we're definitely looking for that in the chart. A more advanced look is what do the humors indicate? The humors were different layers of blood, and so it's like fire humor makes the blood really pushed up. Like fire is the most carried up high humor, and so like acne comes from fire humor. So they would say that the blood is actually trying to push out, and so a lot of super fiery people are like, I gotta go jogging, I gotta get out of here, my blood is pushing on me from the inside, but they also have acne, right? So it's like the humors will show a certain build, which shows like how the person functions. Earth humor, which is like is called it's called well, it's melancholic. If you're earthy, you're melancholic, but it's called melanos, and it's carried downwards. So there was these concepts, anaphoric and cataphoric, which is carried upwards and carried downwards. So earth and water are carried downwards. So like earth and water people are like this. I just want to sit here at my desk, and like the whole school's like falling apart. The Taurus lady at the front desk is like, I'm just sitting here holding down the fort because I like to sit down. I'm carried downwards. My blood is bottom. It's like boom. Okay. But then the fire people are like, get me out of here. I gotta get out of the school. My blood is boiling and I gotta go. Okay. But literally the humor show, how is the person built to react to the world? So what does the astrophysiognomy indicate? What does the person look like? Things like that. Now I'm gonna use Shane as an example. He's gonna get so annoyed with me. Okay, like Shane, what if I told you were here to be an Olympic athlete? Does your physiognomy support this?
Not unless esports become an Olympic game.
Okay, Shane is a triple Earth chart. He's a Virgo, Capricorn, Virgo. And when I met him, I was like, oh my God, you look just like your chart. And I showed him this picture. He looks just like this body type. Okay. And so he probably won't stand up right now. Stand up, come on. Check this out. Oh my God, he looks just like his chart. Okay. So of course, all the doctors he was trying to date before he met me are like, you're too big. You're too big and there's something wrong with you. And when I met him, I was like, you're my perfect bodyguard. Can you block energies and vibrations too? I have a Pisces moon. I hate that. I hate all those feelings. Okay. I was like, you look just like your chart and you're perfect. I think it was Cassiopeia who said like the chart shows that we're built under God's earth. God created bellies. Do you know that? Some charts have bellies for a reason. So the point is you can heal a lot of people by actually adhering to their telos instead of this idea that anyone can be anything. Like if I was trying to get Shane to be like an Olympic athlete right now, he would be failing. He'd be like, I'm so bad, I'm a bad person, and I can't do anything right. But if I was like, can you sit there and bodyguard me, please? He's like, oh, I can do that, man. I'm awesome bodyguard. I mean, yeah, he's like an online bodyguard mainly. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like he did go to Norwalk with me and sit there calmly, and they called him Ragnar the Viking. No, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. If you want a bodyguard, get a triple earth sign. No, it depends. But the point is how people look is really indicative of what they're here to do. And that's why we want to get away from this idea of like any chart can be anything. Okay. So really we're asking what will grow here mentally, physically, spiritually. Okay. Now, what criteria did traditional astrologers use to assess potentials? First one was nocturnal and diurnal charts. I'm sure that the Hellenists in this group know about sect and nocturnal and diurnal sect. So that's the first thing. If you have a day chart, you're here to do more sun activities, theoretically. And if you have a night chart, you're here to do moon activities. So if you're born with the moon in the middle of the sky at night, they would say you're here to be more like a nanny or a caretaker, or maybe you're more into family affairs. Or if you have a moon in Cancer at the top of the chart, maybe you own a bed and breakfast, right? Because you're a night chart here to do moon things, okay? If you have the sun in Leo at in the 10th house, you're a day chart and the sun's at home in Leo, that would be Jackie Onassis. I think that was her chart, but it's like she's here to be a figurehead and be like, oh, I'm shining and I'm like a public figure and like whatever. But the point is, day chart and night chart are part of Telos. Are you here to do moon things? Are you here to do sun things? That's probably the most basic analysis. The 4 elemental triangles are huge. Like we just looked at the pictures of those. Water charts are really interesting because a lot of water endeavors are not really well paid in our society. Have you ever noticed that? So like music, art, being a nanny. Why do the water people not get any money? It's like the weirdest element. Can you guys think of other things that water people are into?
Psychology,
Nice.
therapist.
Totally. I love this book, Vocational Astrology. You can read about all the different signs and like what they do for work. And this is Judith too. Look at, she totally draws their little bodies on here. So here's the Pisces lady, and she's kind of round, and she's probably, I don't know, and then I don't know. But the point is like, you know, we definitely don't want to tell our watery clients like, you should be shuffling papers in an office, because they're like, it's meaningless, it has no feelings, papers have no feelings. You know, the water people are like, give me tiny kittens, I want to foster at the Humane Society, I just love tiny kittens that have feelings. They are here to do emotional labor, basically. Air signs are here to handle cerebral information usually. You know, Libras do a lot of one-on-one talking, one-on-one. They're also good therapists too. They're more talk therapist kind of people. They're also diplomats, and they do a lot of work with politics and equality, things like that. Geminis are really good at writing, you know, math, science. You know, Aquarius could be really good at all those things as well. They're theoreticians often. But I don't know how much you guys want to talk. Do you guys want to say what you think air people do? All right. Reshi?
They write or teach?
Yeah, write or teach. Totally. It's really interesting to look at astrological color theory, because I always attribute light blue to Gemini, because when the sun goes into Gemini, the sky gets super blue, and a lot of Geminis have blue eyes. Like I'm a Gemini rising, I have the Gemini blue eyes, and the throat chakra is blue. And so they're full of oxygenized blood, and their throat chakras are really busy and all this stuff. And I was working in this college, and the sun went into Gemini, and all of a sudden all the professors came out in blue shirts, and I was like, oh my God, there's Geminis everywhere around here. And it's like, you know, they would see more blue in the eyeballs, see, you know, so I think a lot of them are professors. Okay, earth people are here to do all kinds of things like hold down forts, like, you know, be like the secretary at a school. It depends on the whole chart of like what they do, but they're often very like the stonemasons could be really earthy. You know, there's a lot of practical things, like a lot of Capricorns run businesses. Uh, Earth is kind of a builder. It kind of depends on what Earth sign. A lot of Virgos are doctors. They're very physical and bodily oriented. And then and then the last one, what are we missing? Fire. Oh, fire people are, they do all kinds of things, but they could be teachers, they're uplifting, they're kind of, they could be leaders on a trail in the woods. You know, they're like, I don't like to sit at a desk, I gotta go. A lot of Sagittarians travel for work. So I mean, we're not gonna cover everything, but looking at the element of your client really helps in what are they here to do, you know? So that's the second question. Okay, the biggest one, and I really want to train you guys to look at aspect clusters. Okay, so I always teach my students to make an exploded chart. So Shane's heard this a lot, but it's in architecture, they make a blueprint drawing of like a building, and then they explode, they make an exploded axon where they explode one floor on each page. So they'll have like the first floor, second floor, third floor. With astrologers, we put all the aspects on one chart and it gets really overwhelming. I'm sure you guys look at a chart and you're just like, there's so much there. Like it's just really overwhelming. But if you explode the chart and you put one aspect cluster on each wheel, you'll actually start to see your telos. Okay, so what you'll start to see is like maybe that kid, let's go back to the kid with the Sun Mars conjunction in Aries. That's only one aspect of his personality. So that's like the fighter spirit aspect. And so we might name it, we might be like, you know, student puncher. No, I'm just kidding. We would name it like ultimate fighter or something. But then maybe he has a Moon Saturn conjunction in Capricorn also. And we're like, whoa, and he gets depressed and kind of inward. And we're like, inward shy kid, business builder, entrepreneur, you know, so maybe he owns a fighting gym as he gets older because the Moon Saturn conjunction in Capricorn might own a business or a gym, right? So he's like, oh, he's a manager type. Oh, weird, you know? And then we might notice that he has a Mercury Jupiter conjunction. We're like, what? And he's funny? He's hilarious. How can he be serious and hilarious? Well, it depends on the degree, right? What degree is coming out by transit, right? So this person, you know, we have fighters who are funny, we have fighters that are serious, we have fighters that don't talk hardly at all. But what I want you to do is put your aspect clusters on a wheel and kind of give it a name. You know, sometimes we get like a very serious Capricorn and then they have a really musical aspect in their chart and they're like a classical musician, right? But it's like really, it comes down to these aspect clusters. And, you know, when I work with clients, like I'll work with them over a 15-year span and they'll have, let's say they have Jupiter hitting a square in their chart and they're, let's say it's a Mercury square Mars and their Jupiter's hitting it. And I'm like, oh, are you getting in some fights at work this year? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm writing an article on the fish wildlife thing and how they're killing fish. And I was like, okay, all right. Your Mercury square Mars is up. The scholar fighter in you is up this year and Jupiter's growing that. Okay, that's good. You're doing great. Now remember 3 years ago when Jupiter hit that and you were writing that other paper on sea turtles in New Guinea. And they're like, oh yeah, that paper. And I was like, that was also the fighter scholar in you. Remember your telos. You are here to be a fighter scholar. You're not here to be the nice guy. You're fighting for the rights of human animal or animals across the lands or whatever. But the point is when you work with people over time and you're able to look at their aspect clusters, you can help them grow a cohesive personality that goes on for years and they get better and better and better. You know, with Timmy, his Sun Mars conjunction in Aries, every time he has a transit to it, he's going to be in a fighter mode. And we're like, oh my God, it's Jupiter's going over your Sun Mars. It's time to train. Timmy, we're training for a tournament. Okay. But if Mars hits it for 2 weeks, we're like, all right, we need to get you sparring for 2 weeks. See what I'm saying? But when we have that aspect on a wheel, we can time all the other planets to it and get it training for what it's here to do in real time. Any questions about that concept?
What do you mean by a cluster rather than a single aspect?
Good question. Okay, you psychological astrologers probably have heard about this stuff. Like sometimes you'll have a square and it also has a grand trine coming out of it. Have you ever heard an aspect like that? Where you're like, well, the square is hard, but it's mitigated by the grand trine. Well, that if they're at the same degree, that is one aspect cluster. And you could extrapolate it more and say, I'm going to put the square on one wheel, and I'm noticing that the moon hits that once a week. So once a week, they kind of get in a mood, you know? But then the moon hits this grand trine every 5 days. Interesting. Okay, so the grand trine part of that aspect comes out every 5 days, but the square is at once a week. Okay. All right. So anything that's at the same or similar degree. Now, every chart's its own pattern, right? So some of them meander. So some will have like the sun at 5 Cancer, and then they'll have the Jupiter at 10 Pisces, and then they'll have, you know, so we could have a meandering triangle. And if you don't know if something's on the same wheel or not, you can run the moon over it. You can say, how long does it take for a transiting moon to unfold this aspect? That's where we get into orb, right? Like if that's why they, I think, give things a 10-degree orb. It's like, well, it takes 20 hours for the moon to get both planets in a 10-degree orb. So it's an aspect of personality, but it comes out in 20 hours, you know? But if the aspect unfolds within like 13 hours, you're awake for that whole, you're like, okay, in one day you're doing this aspect. So it's like, it's never, it's kind of a study. Like maybe you guys could in your group have a little work night where you get together and you guys talk about what aspect clusters should go on each wheel, because it's not really that cut and dry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Some are really obvious. Like if it's like a really tight conjunction, you're like, that Sun Mars is obviously on one wheel. Like that thing is, it's like 0-degree orb. Okay, that is for sure an aspect of personality. So you could also start with ask what aspects you know are tight in the chart, and then work with the more meandering ones. And you might say like, okay, I'm going to put this meandering on this one and this one because it kind of goes from this to that and that to this, or you know, it's like you're really trying to notice a pattern, honestly. Okay. So you want to explode the axon, study one aspect at a time. You can do that a lot of ways. You can take one aspect and look forward. You're going to like predicting all these transits to it. And you're like, okay, I'm going to study this aspect on these days. You can also go into the past and study it. You can put the sun on it and be like, oh, like let's say it's a Scorpio aspect. You're like, oh my God, every year around 3 days after Halloween, the sun goes over my Mars in Scorpio. That's why I'm always crabby 3 days after Halloween. What? You know, but you can actually like run the sun over it and say, you know, what is my relationship with the holiday cycle? You know, the sun hits, I think, 5 Capricorn on Christmas. So like if you have something in Capricorn, you might say like, oh, my relationship with Christmas is XYZ, or, but you're basically trying to study the aspect as much as you can. Then you want to look at the current transits to that aspect, what's, you know, what's going on now, and then you're trying to weave a meaningful story with that aspect, you know. How late do we have? How late are we going?
Are we good? I think we're good. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Okay, so the other thing the ancients will look at is prominence studies. Now, this is where Hellenistic astrology is really strong. How prominent will this chart be? This is why we look into essential dignity, which is how strong is, you know, Mars, how strong is Jupiter? Because we want to know how notable the chart will be. Like, will this person be famous for what they do? You know, if we saw that Sun-Mars conjunction in Aries in the 10th house, trine Jupiter and Leo, we're like, that is a really strong Sun, Mars, and Aries. I think this might be a famous fighter, right? Or a very prominent fighter, right? But if the Sun, Mars conjunction's in Aries in the 12th house and it's squared by Saturn, we're like, okay, this is going to be somebody who kind of fights and ends up in more secluded environments because of their fighting, you know. But prominence is a thing to ask yourself, is like, how prominent is my chart? Will it, does it stand out? Is there potential to be a thoroughbred? You know, it's like, if we saw a Moon, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn in the 10th house, we know it's a lot stronger than if it's in the second house or something like that. Remember, all lives are equally beautiful. It's just, this is what the ancients would look at in telos, is what is growing here. And prominence is one of those things. Okay. The end product affects everything from essence to personality to temperament to physical form to occupation. So an example is if we have a Mars strong in the birth chart, we have a martial essence. That means they kind of vibe you in a Mars fashion. They're kind of cranky and like, rah, rah, you know, like are a lot of ultimate fighters like super just chill, nice guys? I don't really know, but I doubt it. I think they're like just all like, oh, just screw you. And blah, blah. They're kind of just martial, cranky people. Their personality might be kind of combative. They might be like in the parking lot and someone hits their car and they're like, you want to go? What? You want to go? And you're like, you know, we could be judging them and be like, you are a bad person. Or we could be like, whoa, I can tell that you're a warrior. Are you going to the gym regularly? You know, like we can just be like understanding the weirdest things. Okay. But the physical form, a martial artist has a certain look to them. You know, if you look at ultimate fighters, they're kind of muscular and they've done a lot of working out to build their muscles, and then their occupation, like a lot of them work as construction workers or physical laborers because they are so strong and full of muscle that they like to do that. Let's take a Venus example. So in the Venus essence, the person might be like really sweet and kind and just vibing you really nice all the time. Like, hey, how's it going? Hey guys, they're on their YouTube channel. Hey guys, I made some puffy rainbow, puffy paint things. Hey guys. That's like a super Venus essence, right? And their personality is like, they're super nice and like, hey, how's it going? And their temperament is like, I'm super nice and I never get in fights. I don't understand why people fight sometimes. Okay, but their physical form might be a bunch of earrings and like rainbows on their shirts and like you know what I'm saying? And then their occupation is that they make puffy paint like things on YouTube. I mean, I don't know. But you get what I'm saying? See how the telos comes out in all these places in the life. Okay. Now, how do we know if the essence of a planet will actually manifest? You know, in planetary strength, people always assume that a strong Mars is bad or is good, or a strong Saturn is good, or a strong Venus is good, or, you know, these things. And it's like, well, that's actually a philosophical question. Is like, is a strong Mars good? I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think it's good to have a strong Mars?
Depends on what you're built for.
Yeah, nothing's either good or bad. Thinking
Good.
makes it so, right?
That's a really
I
good
think it
answer.
lends towards extreme.
It lends towards extremes. That's a great way to say it. A planet that's strong can express what that planet promises. Valence says that very explicitly. If a planet's in its own sign, it can produce what it promises. Okay. But then if you read Valence, he'll be like, Mars promises fighting and shrieking and bloodshed. And you're like, okay, then. All right. But the sun in Leo promises a warm, sunny temperament. And somebody who's like, look at me, look at me. I don't know if you guys know Justin Jedlicka, the human Ken doll, but we've been studying him, and he has a sun in Leo conjunct the North Node. And the North Node will expand whatever it touches. And he's always like getting all these surgeries, and then he's like poking fun at the plastic surgeons. He's like, I can get through any surgery. I'm like, yeah, because your solar plexus is bopping. It's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And the solar plexus, he's like full of orange in the aura and like whatever. That's his chart. But the point is that a sun in Leo can produce a sunny telos. And if you look at the human Ken doll, he's just like all sunny. He's just like, hey, how's it going? Like, so a Mercury in Gemini can produce a Mercury telos, somebody who likes playing games and writing articles, right? So if you want to know more about how if a planet's going to actually express what it promises, you can look in the introduction of the Tetrabiblos, because he has a list, and we're not going to go through these now because we're kind of running low on time, but he gives a list of 11 factors that actually tell you if a planet will produce what it promises. You know, like for example, if it's in the first, 10th or 7th or 4th house, the angular houses, much more likely to manifest. If it's conjunct Jupiter, much more likely to manifest. If Saturn is conjuncted, it's less likely to manifest because Saturn harshes that expression. Okay. Now, of course, we know that Saturn is good for certain things and certain telos. Saturn makes a certain telos. But if we're looking at like how prominent will this planet be, Saturn will just harsh the mellow of that planet, essentially. It'll make it more Saturnian. Okay. Now here we get into the process of unfolding, which is very, very important. Okay, I have to stop sharing here. So it says, once we have gained a clear picture of potentials, as well as the limits of expression, we can turn to a creature's unfolding. Traditional astrologers propose that the natal chart unfold along with the heavens. Specifically, they suggest that we are pulled to growth by heartfelt longings incited by planetary transits. The growth process from a teleological astrologer worldview is really simple. Step 1, you enjoy a new heartfelt longing incited by a planetary transit. Step 2, you grasp outwards towards that heartfelt longing, just like a plant growing to the sun. You remember how the plants grasp towards the sun? Well, they would say that the human has a grasping urge. So like, okay, I'm a super Scorpio, and I love the color black because my aura has a lot of black in it, okay? And I'll have transits and I'll be like, I am longing for some coffee. Okay, it's like my 10th coffee, but I'm like, I am still longing for coffee. I'm going to grab at my coffee and grow forward. It's actually really the grasping of things that grows the human plant. If your kid's addicted to their cell phone and they keep grasping at their cell phone to play words with friends or something, they're actually growing. They're grasping at something. Okay. So what they would say is the transits come in and they create a longing in the spirit. And you should actually ask your kid, what are you doing on your phone? Because they're actually growing. They're like, I was playing words with friends. And you're like, oh, Jupiter was going over there, Mercury and Gemini. They're grasping for word games. Oh my God, I'm going to buy them Upwards. I'm going to buy them Scrabble. I'm going to give them word games to grab at. And then the gamers are always grasping at the tiles and turning their tiles around, and they love to mess with the tiles. And it's like that grasping urge is everything, but it starts with the transit, which creates a heartfelt longing. So every Jupiter transit you guys go into, your chart is going through a new phase of longing to grow that part of your chart. So you guys should notice with Jupiter and Gemini, what house is it in? What planets is it on? What is growing? And you'll probably notice that the Jupiter and Saturn square, they're going to be square to each other, right? So Saturn's like clamping down on us and Jupiter's going to grow us. So we're going to grow in this kind of like grow, step back fashion, right? It's going to be kind of a weird growth pattern. But the point is that this is part of teleology, is growing one transit at a time. So the step 3 is like, if you grasp at what you're longing for, then you'll bear beautiful and bountiful fruits. For example, if an author keeps grabbing at their Sharpie and they're like, oh, give me my notebook, I got to write in my journal, and they start writing a manuscript, it's because they kept listening to their heartfelt longing and grabbing their pen and then writing in their journal. And now we have a beautiful fruit to show to the world. And in fact, just like a plant grows fruits of the vine, a human grows fruits of their vine, which is manuscripts and computer codes and, you know, all kinds of things depending on what their chart grows. Okay, so yeah, the grasping urge is a super important part of teleology. Just think about that what we want to reach for is everything. If we have if we have like 10 things sitting around our office, like, have you ever looked around your room and you're like, I'm not grasping at you, I'm not interested in that. There's like a tarot deck over there, and I never grab at my tarot deck. I'm just like, whatever with that tarot deck. And in fact, my friend Fern was like, I'm going to teach you how to read the tarot. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm not grabbing at the tarot deck. I'm not interested. I'm not growing towards the tarot deck. But when I see my ephemeris, I'm like, give me my ephemeris. I love my ephemeris. I'm grabbing at my ephemeris. I'm an astrologer, Talos. Do you see how I know? It's because I didn't grab at the tarot deck. It's been sitting here. Sometimes I grab at it, but you see what I'm saying? It's like it just sits there doing nothing. Okay. Here's the last concept I'll give you guys today, which is it is actually our choice whether or not we train for our life purpose. This is a Greek word. It's called melatao. They would say you can either train for what you're here for or not. But if you train for what you're here for, you will be busy and bountiful. So if you have a super water chart and you train playing music, you'll be a popular musician. If you have a fiery chart and you train in the sports gym, you'll be a popular and happy fighter. But it's your choice to train for what you're here for or not. So they say, from a lens of the traditional astrologer, it is a person's choice to practice and train for the special life task. Porphyry says, it will be necessary to cultivate excellence in craftsmanship so that a soul might flourish in its works. Various treasures are waiting to be manifested by any man or woman. There are certain habits we might engage to exercise and train the body for its specialized skill set. If we are to train for our unique purpose, the task for which we have made, we will experience fruitfulness and fertility. All right. So I think we can stop there and then take any questions and things like that. I think I blew your mind a little. No, I don't know.
It's awesome. No, it's awesome. It's really confirms something that I've always felt about the issue with having all of the options and how it paralyzes you into this space of like not knowing what your path is or which direction you should go and how would I know where I should go. So I look at other cultures and I'm like, in a way, I'm like, that would be really nice to be born into something and just know what you're here to do because of the peace of mind and to have your path in front of you. So I think that this really speaks to that in a really cool way.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a little disturbed that there's some cultures who just decide what you're born into without looking at, I hope they look at the chart because it's like, there is somebody said, well, they say you can die under the machine of another person. And if someone tells you, let's say your boss is built totally different than you, and they say, oh, well, you should do things X, Y, and Z way, but your transits want to do them a different way, they would say that can actually hurt you. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think if the culture is looking at the chart, then I really think that's a great idea. But I'm an astro radicalist, you know, like I don't want to put my stuff on other people, but
No, it is it's suppressive, but I've always seen like something of a piece within it as well. And what you're offering is such a more nuanced version of that, where it's tailored to the person, and so it's actually in alignment with them rather than like something that's just put on them.
yeah. Yeah, how could we maybe use this with our clients, you know? It's like I think we can get really interested in their purpose. Like, why are you here? What are you made for? What's up with you this year? What are you doing this year that's taking you towards your purpose? You know, life purpose is giving meaning to people's lives is one of the best thing astrologers do. You know, like have you ever heard Christians talk about your calling? They're amazing at life purpose and meaning. Like I'm a Christian astrologer and I love Christians and they'll be like, well, I was called to go on a trip to Japan or whatever. And what they do is when they get visions, which is part of teleology, is like you get a vision for things. That's how you know what to grab at, is like you get the vision and they go with their visions from God. And it's like, good job. You're going towards your telos. Because if you see a vision and you grow towards that, then you are fulfilling your telos, basically. You know, so I think a calling is a great way to look at it. But what the Christians maybe don't have language around is that the callings come in one transit at a time. So it's like when you go through a new Jupiter on a new part of your chart, you get a new calling. You're like, I was called to play music last year, but now I'm called to write a book. And people are like, which am I supposed to do? I'm like, you're supposed to do both, one transit at a time. you know, you're supposed to grasp at what the transit wants you to do now.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like listening to you, it makes me think not only does it give people meaning to do birth charts, but also can just give them permission to like be themselves. Like my friend Brenda once said to me, because I have Mercury in Scorpio and 4 other planets in Scorpio, I'm like, sometimes when I say things, it just stings. Just like scorpions sting. That's what they do. And like just hearing that doesn't make me not want to improve how I communicate in a more loving and harmonious way because I'm a Libra sun. But it's like, oh, it's okay to be that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up actually, because I stopped before this part of the lecture, but what do you do if your chart is manifesting something that's hurtful or harmful, right? Well, that's when we get into astrological remediation. This was my response to reading Valens. I was like, all right, if everything's fate-based, then we have to study remediation, which is there's always a remedy for anything in the chart. So it's like, you know, I agree that your chart's perfect being a super like Scorpio. It's like Scorpios are here to cut through the mustard and like they're martial water. They're like actual water warriors, right? They're like I can see tensions and I'm going to move you through that tension and get, you know, they always say the thing that that needs to be said essentially, right? To move the energy. You know, so we number one would say you're perfect how you are, that you are expressing Scorpio traits. And there's a good thing there. But number two, if we don't like something about our chart, we can always do remediation, which is trying to find ways to remedy what we don't like, basically.
I love that.
Would you say that would be like balancing with the opposite sign? Or by the opposite degree of the placement?
Very good job. You must have studied remediation. That's one huge theory they use is the opposites. So like if you're too Scorpio, go towards a Taurus, a Venusian, because like Scorpio is Mars ruled and Taurus is Venus ruled. So you could take Venus herbs. You could wear a Venus stone. You're trying to be more Venusian or Taurus, which is being nice and peaceful, essentially. So Chevy is your name, right?
Yes.
You're totally good job on the remedy front. That's actually one huge, and even in color theory, like for example, Scorpio's like blood red and black, like, you know, all the zombies come out during the Scorpio time and then we're seeing like blood and guts. Well, Taurus is all like peaceful twigs and brown peaceful leaves, you know, so you're like, all right, she's in her Scorpio mood, let's show her some twigs. Like you're supposed to look at the opposite color, like basically. So
Is there anything in teleology that is like, I don't know how to say, maybe trumps one thing or the other in its importance? Like, yes, you focus on daytime, nighttime chart, and then you walk through, you see the placement, but is there anything that is like aspects are more important, say, than placement, or you know what I mean?
yeah, good question. I think aspect clusters are really what I end up working with people with most often because they're repeated, right? The transits repeat to those aspect clusters and they're cyclical. So, you know, yeah, I would say aspect clusters. If you're going to study one thing, study that. And the signs too, in a way, like, you know, Caitlin knowing that she's a super Scorpio, it's like that's very healing to just know, you know, and study Scorpion traits and say like, okay, you know, so I think the signs are really helpful also. Jael says we're talking about them too much. Jael's a great philosopher. So, okay, Scorpios can become nurses who inject medicines. Oh, nice. I can see where that would be martial water. Is like in order to heal somebody, you're actually poking. Like Mars is always talked about, like poking and things like that. You know, iron and things. So yeah, you're true. That's true. That would be a form of healing. That's kind of martial. It would be like giving injections or being a phlebotomist, perhaps. Now, sublimation.
Surgeons.
What is it?
Surgeons.
Oh yeah, surgeons, totally.
Lots of surgeons. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, sublimation as remediation, I don't totally agree with that because I actually think of mega manifestation as more remediation. There is balancing, like that's what Chevy brought up, is like the balancing act of remediation. Um, but I actually am a big mega manifestationist, and that's another lecture we could do. But it's basically using the most of your chart. Like what a lot of healers notice is that when people get bound up chi in the aura, they get sick. So it's like, let's say somebody has a Mercury Mars conjunction in Aries or something, and they're always swearing and talking and saying really like, we would say they have a lot of iron on the throat chakra, and we could try to get them to sublimate it with remedies and say like, let's balance it out and put some Venus herbs on the throat and let's give them some Venus herbs or whatever. And I'm like, no, let's actually hyper express that Mars. Let's have them be like a commentator at a sports arena, like, and he's going, and he's going, and like, and we actually want to get the energy out. Like, I'm more of a mega manifestation person than a sublimate, because repression of Mars makes people very sick, actually. So, but I see what you're saying. Like, remediation can be a sublimation of hard energies. That could be one form of remedy. If you guys want to learn more about remediation, there's a lecture on YouTube I did at Kepler. It's just called Astrological Remediation, and it's free, so you guys can watch that. It's got a lot of views. So. It does. It got like 3,500 views in 4 weeks, so it must be good.
Don't you also have a YouTube channel for remediation?
Oh yeah, I just started a YouTube channel on remediation. Well, I'm trying to teach people remediation, so yeah, you can just look up my name on YouTube and find it. Anything else? Any questions or comments? I really appreciate you guys.
I had one. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, my video's making my internet slow, otherwise I would turn it on. I wanted to ask about, I love that you brought up the Fibonacci sequence and the spiral thing, because that's like a number that I'm kind of obsessed with and have been for a long time. And recently I was looking at that as like an aspect, and it turns out David Cochran already did that, and he did this whole study on like golden mean ratio aspects and stuff, basically like looking at like a Fibonacci sequence of a aspect in a chart. And I guess I just wanted to know if you had ever heard of that or what you think about that.
I think that you should do a lecture on it, Giles. Giles like so smart. I'm serious. You're the professor. Man. You're the new professor around here.
Well, I need to study it for like 2 more years, but I don't know anything yet. I'm just fascinated. It's really interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting thing once you start to kind of look at that. And then there's sort of a midpoint part of it too. But I will also add that I really agree with your idea about remediation in terms of like, I kind of like to think of it as like giving the planet or the aspect like a promotion or a better job, because it's like it's kind of like having a crappy job and you're not liking the results of the job that it has. So it's kind of like, okay, what would be like a better job for you? Like right now you're stabbing your sister. Like maybe we could turn you into a chef or something. I don't know. I mean, I think of a kid now, but yes. Anyways.
Gael, I love that point. One of the strongest chapters in the remediation book, and I know this because Judith Hill called me yesterday to tell me this, and she was like, the symbolic substitution chapter in that book is just amazing. But that is symbolic substitution, where we basically take somebody out of a context that's not working or helping for their chart, and we put them in a context that is just amazing. And I love your idea there that it's like a promotion. God, we always think when people are behaving badly, we should fire them. But I like what you're saying is they're like promote them into a better position. That's brilliant, honestly.
Thank you. Well, thanks for writing your cool book.
Yeah, sure. All right, well, Cassiopeia, thank you so much for having me and putting this on. I really, really appreciate it. And I love the posters.
Oh, you were brilliant. I loved every minute of this. This was like so funny, and you really broke it down and made it so practical. And I really feel like you changed the way I see the chart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hellenistic astrology needs teleology. I'm going to release this lecture.
Yeah, please do. I'm gonna share it a lot.
Okay. All right, y'all. Well, have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.